30 minutes. We're really just going live in the Generate group here. I'm going to be your community leader. I'm going to be keeping an eye over here on any Facebook comments that come up. And today I'm super pumped to interview somebody who started out 10 years ago as my friend and my personal attorney, does all the estate stuff and business planning and business entities. But then in the last year or so, Alex Bruno, buddy, really stepped up his game doing a podcast called Biz Mode, Bizmode. Oh, nice. You got like the official stuff now. Biz Mode podcast where Alex interviews small business owners because he is effectively the in-house counsel for those small businesses that can't yet afford to have an in-house counsel. So first of all, Alex, thanks for being here. And maybe we can jump right into it, right? In this time of COVID-19 and craziness, how are you generating leads? Like, how is the legal profession generating leads right now when you can't see people in person?
Right. So it's definitely a challenge because, like you said, we can't see people in person. So we can't do the normal stuff, which would be the old traditional would be going and having lunch with someone, going out for a drink or maybe even coffee. Now it's more of one, you go back to your base, right? So I always go back to my bases, check in with my base. How's my base doing? Because one, I just was worried. How are people doing themselves? But then, we kept Biz Mode going, which was a podcast, which reaches out to a bunch of different people. So that helps. One good thing we talked about recently, you and I talked about is that, the unique thing with lawyers that a lot of people might not know about is that we can give referral fees to other lawyers. And lawyers we're like doctors. So we only specialize in a couple things. And if there's something else, we're not going to touch it because we don't want to mess things up for people, but we can cross refer. And when you're able to cross refer, you're able to share a fee with it. So that helps us as well and incentivize both sides to participate.
I got to tell you, this is one place where us lenders get frustrated that, I can't refer a loan to somebody who's a VA expert or who's a renovation expert and then get a referral fee. So super jealous of that. And tell me a little bit more, because I think most businesses are more like yours and less like mine. Most businesses can kind of come up with some type of referral fee or legal pay to play or something like that. So how does that happen kind of organically? I mean, is it just as frank as a lawyer calls you and says, hey, I'm sending this over to me. You owe me X amount of dollars, or how does that referral fee conversation work? How do you protect yourself? How do you put it in writing?
Right. So the business lawyer side of me is always going to be like, yeah, you can do it. You can do it over the phone if you have that good relationship. But Alex, the lawyer, would tell me, don't do that. Put it in writing. And it's legal. If everyone's licensed in the same jurisdiction, it's legal to do. And you got to cap your fees. You can't there's certain limitations you have. But you just commit it to paper. There are a lot of lawyers as well, and I do this on with some lawyers as well, is where we're kind of just like, we're going to take care of each other. Don't worry about the fees because you're bringing me leads. I'm going to give you leads, and it's going to pay for itself. So sometimes we do that as well.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how like powerfully this resonates for me, because I think a lot of people that I work with, in the mortgage business, the real estate business, there's a lot of a scarcity mindset where it's like, well, I'll drive all the way across town to show somebody a house because I'm scared of losing that commission, or I'm scared of only getting 25 or 50% of that commission. Why is it different in the legal world where you're like, hey man, like if this just isn't my lane, I'll just send it over here. It's no big deal. Like it just seems like such a more abundant mindset of like, give away a lead and somehow it's going to come back to me. Like, how has that developed in your business? Because I'm guessing not all lawyers are like you.
Right. I was about to say that. So not all lawyers are like me in terms of having that abundant mindset, or you're operating from abundance as opposed to scarcity. I actually do this with clients lawyers who do the same thing that I do. If it doesn't fit exactly what I want, or I know they're going to fit better with someone else, or like you said, I'm in Southern California, so I'm on the Northeast side. If someone's in Santa Monica and they want to meet face to face with someone, I'm gonna say, don't trek hour and a half to 2 10 even though we're like 10 miles away. You know what? Just go to my buddy over there on the west side. And it's more of like, the idea is you're gonna get more. The more you put out, the more you're gonna get back. So you got to have that mindset and just trust that it's gonna happen, and it does.
So tell us a little bit, shifting gears. I know that kind of giver's gain mentality, The Go Giver is a great book, and I know you believe in that stuff. Tell us how that evolved into a podcast and why you're doing it and maybe what it's leading to.
Right. So the podcast had that kind of frame of mind as well with the podcast. Was like, I was giving a lot of advice already for small business owners and people just starting up with their companies. And I was like, why is it just me saying it? Why is it just my voice? Why can't I interview people who've done it? And I'm a big believer in don't reinvent the wheel. If someone's already done it, just, kind of follow what they're doing because they've gone through the struggles and the battles that you don't need to go through. And you're gonna be better for it. So listen to those battle stories, listen to those war stories, or whatever you want to call it, and get better about it. And so that's what motivated me. And like you said, that as soon as you said giver mindset, I was like, oh, the go giver. And it's kind of like one of those things, you put it out there and it's going to come back to you.
And tell us a couple of the cool things that you've learned through interviewing business people. Like I feel kind of like my business, your business is very similar, where you get to see the inner workings of somebody's finance or their profession. Like, what's some of the stuff you've learned that you're like, oh, that's really interesting?
Well, it's kind of like, it's just interesting as what you're into, like what you're into or what you're going through as a business owner, as a person at the time, things speak to you. So every time I was interview somebody, it's like, it's resonating with me. So one of my first interview, the people I interviewed, they're talking about, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to get stuff done. And at that point, I was struggling with getting something done. And it was just speaking out to me saying, just get it done. Don't worry about perfecting everything. And so there's just a lot of little tidbits that come in from these clients and clients and guests, because some of them do happen to be clients that I'm trying to figure out one that would be a really cool tidbit. But I think most of it is, you gotta operate from, I think generally everyone has an idea of, it sounds so hokey when you're first thinking about doing it, but really being firm on what your values are, really being firm on what your mission is, it's really going to help you be a better business person, be a better entrepreneur, because it's really going to help you say no to things. And what's been good with Biz Mode is that it has reinforced a lot of these principles.
Yeah. And, I think that's something we talked to Elise Archer yesterday, who was like, hey, before you get started, have some thought about how you're going to monetize things. Or, if you're going to start putting out a social media strategy of answering 30 questions your client might have, have a plan, right? And if you're watching this or you watched the one yesterday, do me a favor, just leave a comment, hit the like button. Like, this is important stuff, right? And if you have any legal questions for Alex, we'll see if we can stump him on something. But, at the end of the day, I feel like had you done this Biz Mode podcast and never got a client from it, the conversations that we've had, you're like, well, I'm still learning so much from it. I might as well do it just for your own selfish purposes. And I know that's not the reason you started it, but are you feeling that way, that you're learning a bunch from the journey, that it's going to make it worth it no matter what?
Right. And so it is about that journey. And it's like right now I'm doing it. So I'll do things like I'll do like that time specific thing. So I did stuff about one of the last episodes was the 3 things I learned in quarantine, and it was business related, but it was something that, that it's something that I'm going to continue to pursue. I love it when the guests come on because it does provide that different perspective, but it's something I'm really enjoying. The one aspect that what we're doing right now, this live portion of it, that we need to add to it is we're going to add a video component to it, which we haven't added yet. So it's pure audio right now. So that's the next step. You're
going to go Joe Rogan and start filming your interviews, right?
Right. But we're just going to, we're going to keep it PG-13, no smoking, no drinking on the air.
Perfect. Real quick, somebody's asking some questions about business structure. Does TCJA mean anything to you? TCJA 17. He was like, should I convert from an S to an S corp or something? Does that speak your language at all? I asked for some clarification here.
It sounds like it's some kind of federal act, unless it's specific to.
We'll find out from Aaron. We'll get some clarification.
The Jobs Act. Yes, definitely. Oh. Sorry. Sometimes we miss the acronym. Yes, of course. So I think I think we were on a talk together a while back, Scott, on this, on the reason why people should convert to like an S corp versus just saying as a solopreneur or a 1099 contractor. And with the Jobs Act, what it did back then in 2017 was that it really reduced the amount of money that you can deduct on your Schedule C as a 1099 person. So creating your own S corp is going to help you from a tax perspective, and it's also going to help you because when you're a 1099, your earnings are all subject to self-employment tax. So actually having something in place like an S corp, you're actually going to be able to kind of reduce your what's subject to employment taxes.
Nice. So if you're, and I feel like there used to be kind of a rule of thumb, and I won't even say it out loud in case these numbers have changed. I remember there used to be kind of a rule of thumb, like, hey, if you get to the point where you're consistently making over X, it probably makes sense to incorporate it. I know you're not a tax professional. We're obviously not giving out tax advice here. I'll interview Emil in a few weeks so that we can give out tax advice. But do you have a guideline? Like if you're talking to a new consult, getting to know somebody, is there kind of a number like, hey, you're making over 50 or 100 or 250, we should be looking at a corporation? Or is it more a structure or an income? What's your thoughts there?
We kind of grid it out. So we use like a grid. So we'll grid it because some people are not just worried about money, they're worried about their risk. And so there's a risk aversion too. So if you're making if you're just starting out and you don't even have revenue, you might still want to incorporate for protecting your own personal liability because you own a home, you have other business ventures, you don't want to expose your other stuff to this one. So we want to isolate and silo it. But really rough. And again, this is the big caveat is talk to your own tax advisor. It's great that you're having Emil on because he's great at this type of stuff. But you want to start, you're generating revenue where you're generating revenue. One way to figure out, and so we're getting close to the 6 figures is what we're looking at. But one way to figure it out is if you're getting killed on taxes when you were 1099, that's just a quick thing. If you're paying too much in taxes, that's a red flag for you.
Hey, Alex, spoiler alert, everybody's paying too much in taxes. just ask them. And by the way, Danielle, Dan Ortega, Nicole, Kimberly, Aaron, if you have additional legal questions, put them here. We'll answer them as vaguely as possible. Yeah, Dan jumped on. I think you guys actually maybe work together. So tell me a little bit. I know you kind of have two components of your business. You do the in-house counsel for the small business owner. That obviously shifts gears pretty quickly into, hey, what's your estate plan? How are you holding your stuff in trust? How are you protecting your wealth? What does that side of the business look like today as people are maybe, right now scared of their property value and being destroyed? People have probably over the last 60 or 90 days having very deep thoughts about their mortality with the whole COVID-19. Like what's going on the estate planning side of the business, or what are you seeing there?
So it's interesting because just to take a step back on the business side, what I was doing right before COVID-19 was we were really in the middle of a bunch of business sales or business acquisitions. A lot of those got put on pause because of everything was put on pause. And so what really picked up to supplement that was the estate planning. And like you said, Scott, it's people are worried about their mortality. They're worried about, well, if something happens to me, well, who's going to take care of my child or my children? If something happens to me, I want the wealth to stay in the family and not to go out to, pay court administrators or pay taxes. Like we just talked about taxes, that we want to make sure that it stays with the family. And so we create a trust for that, especially in California. If you own a piece of land in California and you don't have a trust, there's going to be a process that's going to take a while. And speaking to my probate colleagues, it's even take longer. We were like in a 1 to 2 year scenario in Southern California in LA County, but now courts have paused. So courts, they're only doing essential stuff. So like criminal matters is essential, but now, so that probate time is being extended even further. So the way to avoid that and way to avoid keeping the money in the family is to have a trust. So we had a big blip on that, and which was grateful for us because that helped us from a business standpoint.
And yeah, same question, kind of back to the lead generation. I think a lot of people right now in this time of COVID-19 and now civil unrest, I know a lot of people and a lot of businesses that are like, oh, it feels kind of tacky to like reach out and talk to people, or it feels weird to call past clients and check in with them and maybe have that lead to an upsell or whatnot. I've always felt like you've got the tackiest job. Like you've got to talk to people about their own mortality and like,
right.
All right, so when you die, who gets the artwork? Who gets the Rolex? Who gets the money in the bank? Like that's like one of the weirdest conversations you can have. So I feel like you and other estate attorneys are uniquely equipped to be lead generating the time, because you're like, well, these are the conversations I have anyway, all day, every day, about people dying and their business succession and stuff. So maybe you can talk a little bit to like your superhero power about like in these times or in these awkward conversations, how do you start that conversation? How are you talking to them authentically about it? Because I know a lot of people right now that are just frozen with fear. They're like, dude, like some of the city is literally on fire. The last thing I'm going to do is call a client about a sale or, you know, about something I'm trying to get for myself. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
It's just kind of like, one is just to have the emotional like intelligence of like an awareness of where the client is at or where the person is at. So you got to approach them with like empathy and just from a human level. How are things going? And it's kind of interesting because before it was like, how are things? That was our starter, right? Our conversation starter. How are things going? Everything's great. And then we move forward. And now it's more of like, how's it going? Well, it's not going so great. Here's I had a call with a client like that yesterday. But then you can go into other things if they want to explore it. The interesting thing is always to talk about death. So it's always, you got to have an interesting talk with people about death because everyone's different. Some people are very matter of fact of it. They say, yeah, it's death. I'm going to die. Some people you have to say, well, when you go away, when you're no longer with us. So you got to be very interesting in the wording and the language you use. But it's kind of like just kind of continue to be authentic with it and operate from a place of, not to sound so, well, operate from a place of love and caring, and people are going to see that.
And I mean, you and I know each other really well, so you can just, you know, when I walk into your office, you're like, all right, Scott, any updates for when you like kick the bucket, you know, get lip cancer from smoking cigars? Like you and I have that rapport. When you are talking to other people, is there a feeling out stage of question and answer, or do you, you know, do you kind of prejudge and stereotype by age, or how are you making that determination of like, oh, this can be a little harder, a little softer? Like where does the language decision come from?
Well, yeah, I go in with a more conservative approach. Like like you said, I can get away with some things from you. Like, Scott, what's the business? Like, we'll just get right into business. List to me what you need. And then I'm not going to be worried about you being upset about me asking these questions. Other people, it is a little bit more sensitive. So you do have to take it from a very conservative approach and just kind of ease your way into it. And one way is we just talk about assets at first, and then I explain the process. Explaining the process helps people a lot because it also distracts them from the death aspect to say, hey, it's about the giving part for them. So they're saying like, wait a minute, I want to give to my family. I don't want to necessarily give to the LA County LA County and the IRS. That helps. That can also serve as a motivator and help shield from that uncomfortable talk of death for many people.
Yeah, kind of villainize the county and the unknown future. And I think a lot of good people are doing this right now. Is like, hey, we've got to be having business conversations or personal conversations because of this greater evil, you know, whether it's COVID-19 or racism or some existential threat that now maybe we have to have a personal decision about or a personal conversation about. A couple questions. When you set up a trust or an estate or whatnot, and you and I have, you know, talked probably more often than the normal client, I think, just because, you know, we've become a referral source back and forth to each other. Like, what does that look like for your follow-up plan? Because I think so many people and so many businesses are like, all right, cool, I'm just going to use round numbers. I charge the $3,000 for the estate plan and the trust and everything's done. And okay, Scott, call me when you're dead. But I know that's not the case. Like, you have some follow-up steps and you have some check-ins and you have some maintenance agreements and stuff. So what are you doing to monetize your business past that first introduction? Because, you know, thanks to LegalZoom and stuff, I always have clients be like, oh, you've got a good attorney guy. What does he cost for a trust? And I'm like,
right,
I don't know. Does it matter? Like, when you die, are you going to be real upset you spent $1,500 versus $1,000? I don't know. So how are you monetizing things and having that ongoing relationship?
Well, one way to have, I mean, the quick thing to have an ongoing relationship, you start with letting the client know that this is not just an initial transaction, it's a relationship. So, I mean, when I approach a lead or approach somebody, I also, it's a double-sided interview. So I always start with like, I'm just seeing if I can connect with you and I can work with you as well. Because there are situations where I say, you know what, I'm not the right person for you and it's not going to work. So putting in that framework, it's establishing a relationship as opposed to I'm a commodity like LegalZoom is like. LegalZoom is like, I'm going to the store and I'm buying something off the shelf. You're not buying something off the shelf here. You're actually going to start a relationship with us. And the ways we do it is just make sure we keep in contact with people. We do have maintenance agreements with certain clients who want to go into that route, because you got to let the education that the clients needs and the customer needs here is that this is an evolving process. It's not something that because we do it now in 2020, you're never going to change it. You're actually going to change it probably at least 3 to 4 times in your lifetime. And anytime that there's a big life event, whether you're buying a new home, whether there's new members of the family, or like we talked about earlier, you're doing a new business, and we want to make sure we take care of that as well. So that's the way we do it. I mean, it's easier on the business side because if you have companies, we're always got to keep them updated. So it's easier to kind of keep that going in terms of a monetization thing. But the way is just kind of continue to educate the client and also inform the client again that it's a relationship. It's not just a one-time transaction.
By the way, you're speaking my language here, because one of the favorite books that I've read recently is Never Lose a Customer Again with Joey Coleman. I posted the interview in this group, and he always talks about showing clients versus telling clients. And what's great is the way that you just explained this, and I think you do this naturally, but he actually talks how to script it out in the book, is you're saying like, hey, the reason I'm finding out if we have a good relationship is because this is going to be a long-term relationship. That way you're showing them like, hey, I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me, because I'm not just here for the transaction. I want to get the next 7, 8, 10 years of follow-up stuff. And I love that you're showing them that through your actions versus just telling them. I think a lot of us make the mistake of giving lip service of like, oh yeah, this is a long-term relationship. All right, what's your credit card number again?
Yeah, exactly.
That's brutal. So tell us a little bit. I'm guessing you only do business here in Southern California, but who needs these services, right? Like in your world, when you're lead generating, and one of the reasons I want to bring on people I trust is because I would never bring anybody on here who I haven't given my own money to, which I think other people should therefore give you money if you need services. Like what are the services you're lead generating for when you're talking to people or when you're out there in a crowd or a dinner party? Like, how does that weave into the conversation where you start to generate business just in normal conversation? Or what are you prospecting for?
So I'm prospecting for people who are one, they have that growth mindset. So that you want to look for people who have that growth mindset, because that's going to help in terms of that relationship that we're trying to establish. But I'm looking for people who like you mentioned it when you lead it off. It's like we work with business owners and individuals, especially in the business side, where they're growing, but they're not growing enough that they can have someone on staff, but they need someone as part of their team. And so I'm looking for someone who sees that and recognizes that. We're not necessarily looking for people who are just that one-time transaction or looking for the best deal, because we're not the best fit for them, because we're not going to be the best deal for them. Generally, we're looking for people who have that mindset of, I want to grow with you and I want to learn from you, just like I want to learn from them. Like we talked about with Biz Mode, we're learning from people as well. So we're looking for people to become part of their team, essentially.
And then a question on that, you mentioned, you hit on the pricing thing. Where do you find for your business and as this relates to lead generation, where do you find that happy medium between like, hey, I'm not going to be the LegalZoom low cost leader, but I'm also not trying to gouge people, or, maybe I don't want to answer the phone at 2:00 in the morning when Scott has an estate planning question. So I'm not going to deliver the absolute concierge white glove service. So where have you decided on your pricing strategy as far as, the rest of the market? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are worried about right now is like, am I pricing too high to drive away valuable clients? Or am I pricing too low where I'm going to get stuck in these low cost relationships that I don't really want to be in? So where are you pricing yourself as comparison to the market?
I would say we're, well, it's really gonna vary depending on the relationship and depending on what the service we're providing in terms of pricing. And it's for me, pricing is still evolving. It's still evolving as to what's the best fit. There's still units I'm trying to measure here. If you want to get into metrics, there's still metrics I'm trying to measure here to say, are we doing it right? Because I want to actually, we still have the old model, and that's one thing I'm trying to break out of in terms of my own personal growth, is to break out of the hourly model on the business side. So there's still an hourly model, and that could be scary for a lot of people. So we're not like I think if you look at it in the spectrum, we're not the cheapest on the block, and by cheapest on the block, I'm saying the cheapest attorneys on the block, but we're not the super, like you said, the white glove concierge service. We're probably in the middle of all of it.
I love it, man. What other things do people need to know about generating that business? Because you are the definition of a sole proprietor, right? Like, I mean, I see you at more networking events than any other human being I've ever met, because you've got to go out and get 100% of your business. I mean, I don't even think it's legal to, like, can you leave lawyer reviews online? Is that like the financial industry? I mean, everything seems weird to me in the legal industry because it's so backwards from what I do.
You can. I think it's when the lawyer is advertising, you got to be careful how you say it. So like at the end of like the podcast, we say, this is not legal advice. Like we say stuff like that, or we'll put a tag in. So in terms of like outreaching to people, you can just do it, but just the big thing is to make sure that you don't have a relationship.
Right.
Until you do. So that's the big thing, because people are always, it's just like anybody. I mean, that happens to you. Like, hey, Scott, what's the number today? And how can I, here's my, and you want to make sure that you're not creating a relationship until you're ready. And so I think that's the key point when you're outreaching to people is like you mentioned, there are certain people we can help outside of California, but we got to understand what the relationship is before we can, because I can't do law in Montana. So if you're in Montana and you need to open up a Main Street business in Montana, I'll find you someone, but we can't do it.
And then a couple questions here is, and this may be a better question again for Emil next week when I'm going to interview him. Do you know what the current estate exemption is? Like, I don't know how many tens of millionaires we're talking to right now, but
yeah, if you're a multimillionaire that's over, there's two different. Yeah, if you're a multimillionaire over 5.5 million or 5 and some change, 5.5 million, and then of course if it's about over 11 for couples, for a married couple. If that's what you're going to end up with, then your planning has to be a little bit different. But most of us fall under that, so we're not really worried about it. The big thing that you have to do, think about and look about, and this is why we have to keep these relationships up with our clients, is the current exemptions are going to sunset in 2025. So we might go back down to $1 million, and especially if you're in California, your house could be worth $1 million.
Yeah.
So we're gonna monitor that, because that could change. But right now, if you're over 5 million, let's talk too, because you need help. You need help beyond the basic living trust. But if you're under 5.5 million, the federal government is not going to take any taxes away from you. But also keep in mind, every state's different on the state taxes. California doesn't have a specific tax for it, but there are other states that still do.
Cool, man. I want to shift back real quick to Biz Mode, because I know that that's like your passion right now. How many episodes in are you on Biz Mode?
We're a little over 25. I want to say we're either 26 or 27. We had a cool first season. Our first season was everyone was food-based entrepreneurs. So companies and everyone from like someone who had the local cafe over here in Eagle Rock, found coffee, shout out great coffee. Of course, some of you don't like coffee like Scott. Unless we finally converted you, I don't know.
No, still iced tea.
They do have iced tea, though. They have good iced tea. To someone who is a CEO of a chip company, and then there's some cool food tech out there, and so that was cool for the first season. The second season that we started earlier this year was supposed to be based on creators, people who create and do, and makers and do stuff. But then COVID hit, so we kind of shifted. We shifted the programming in the middle of it. So now it's kind of like related to we had someone come in talking about working from home, which was new to a lot of people. And so, and in the pipeline, we have a couple people who are counselors and mental health people that I want to put on there as well, because there's a lot of different things going on. You mentioned the civil unrest, the protests that were going on, but just the fact that we're living in a different reality and a different normal. It's important for you to take care of yourself, but also if you're dealing with children, you got to be able to communicate with your children as well. So the program is shifting, but it's fun. There's a lot of I get a lot of great takeaways from a lot of the guests that are on.
And I know, last question, and then I'll let you go because I know your time is super valuable and you're probably billing me in 15-minute increments here.
Yeah. Every 6 minutes, actually.
Every 6 minutes you're billing me. Perfect. So in this podcast, like, I know you're lead generating, you're running a team, you're running your legal business. You know, you don't have 20 hours a week to schedule podcasts and record and do all this stuff. How are you outsourcing, or what's your management process to be like, all right, you know, for a lot of us, we're the talent and we step on stage, we do, you know, pick a number, the $100 an hour activity or the $500 an hour activity, however much money you want to make. But then there's certain logistical tasks that have to happen for your podcast to get up on iTunes and Stitcher. So how are you finding that balance of like handing off this stuff or contracting out that stuff? Like, I think a lot of people in business struggle. Like, am I hiring too early? Am I too overloaded? Am I doing too many nominal tasks that I could pay somebody else to do? So what has been your experience with launching this podcast from scratch? And, you know, what are you handing off? What are you doing yourself? Or maybe you're doing it all yourself. I don't know.
Well, I'm definitely not doing it all myself. If I did it all myself, it wouldn't have gotten done. But I learned a while back is that you got to know your own value. The interesting thing about entrepreneurs is that we love to do everything ourselves. We are tinkerers. We like to learn. We like to learn how things are made. We like to learn how things are built out. But you got to also know your value and know that your time is going to be optimized doing something else. So my time is kind of preparing for the podcast, identifying guests, and interviewing with the guest. My time is not going to be best used producing it, which is actually making sure all the ums and ohs and unts are out and the weird pregnant pauses are out and making sure the noise is reduced. I have a team. It's a team that works out. It's a team up north in San Jose. A Noteworthy Lab is actually the company, Noteworthy Lab. And they produce it all for me and they help give me the scripts. There's the social media content. They put that stuff together. This thing, we had another crew that put together this little artwork that we had there. All of that was done. I'm just, like you said, we just get ready to do this stuff. And I'm grateful for the team that I have there to help us book things and get it done.
Man, I think you gave us the mic drop moment of the interview, which was, if I did it myself, it would have never gotten done.
That's right.
And I think that is such a relevant takeaway for anybody who's in business, a salesperson, an entrepreneur. You know, we just think we can do everything better, everything faster, but then you just run out of bandwidth. So I love that quote. If I would have done it myself, it would have never got done. Alex, man, I really appreciate you being on. And, you know, speaking about reoccurring revenue, you and I have already updated my estate plan, you know, when I got married, when I had kids, when I found out I had another kid, and, you know, then our parents are getting older. We'll have to update it again. No more kids. I did get snipped, so we're all safe there. But yeah, we got to get together for lunch and an estate plan update whenever this calamity passes. And I can't wait to see you in person, man.
Likewise, for sure. Thank you for having me on, and it's good to see you.
If you're watching this, subscribe to Biz Mode or friend Alex Bruno. He'll give you 6 free minutes of legal advice, and then he starts charging you.
That's right.
And we'll talk soon, man.